Hi, I'm Seamless, and this is Superior Drummer 3. This is a review for Superior Drummer 3 that was brought to you by TuneTrack, the company that makes Superior Drummer. I've used Easy Drummer and Superior Drummer for a long time. It has been my experience that Superior Drummer in general is the best acoustic drum library sampler environment that you can get. And now that Superior Drummer 3 is a thing, my verdict is it's pretty much the best drum production environment that exists. I'm aware that's somewhat subjective. There's other options that do kind of very different things that would not totally be applicable for whatever workflow I'm about to describe, but for the most part, if you want drums, Superior Drummer is just the best there is. That's how I feel. But let's talk about the hows and the whys. Well, if you're unfamiliar with Superior Drummer, the whole idea is centered around treating a drum recording like a drum recording. An actual drum recording, when you record it in a studio, has the instruments set up the way they are, and then there's microphones that are pointed at every individual instrument. These are called close mics, and there's overhead mics that record the overall ambience of the kit, and primarily the individual cymbals, and those are overheads, and there's different kinds of overheads, and then there's ambient mics, where there's mics way over someplace in the room somewhere that get you kind of like, essentially, analog reverb. Remember that joke, analog reverb is get a bigger room. Well, that's kind of exactly what that is in terms of recording it in an actual environment. The way the Superior Drummer handles this is that every drum in here as an instrument is not considered like just a sample. It's not like, okay, here's the snare sample, it is one thing, that's what's up. It is a snare in a room in a bunch of microphone positions. If you go to the mixer section, look at this mixer. Is this not like a dollar or what? P.S. You can detach every one of these windows, and you can full screen them on some other monitor. You can have a multi-monitor freaking Superior Drummer setup. Jeez. The snare exists as a snare top, a snare bottom, so you get you get that kind of mix in there. Also exists in any of these sort of extra ambient microphones, like the overhead, for example, or this ambient mic. Now, the super cool thing about this is that this is considered bleed from the various instruments and the other guys. The overheads have to have the cymbals in them because those are essentially the close mics for the cymbals, just as the snares have to have this. They go in there. And I mean, you can change this routing individually in the instrument. You can go into the instrument thing, and you can make that mic position come out some other mic position if you really want to. And that there's reasons you might want to do that if you want to combine certain tonalities into a single mixer insert without having to worry about using buses and whatnot, because although while you can do all the sending and busing and routing and mixing you want, you don't necessarily have to either. And this is just what I love about plugins like this. Like, I like FL for also the same reasons. It is dense. So dense with options for control, down to levels that a lot of people will have no value for, but for people like me that want molecular control over everything you're doing, and which also is kind of important for when you're doing any kind of modern electronic production, this is the best ever. You get yourself the close mics that are in there, but every one of these guys also has bleed for every other one of the instruments, because when they set this up and they recorded this kit, they kept the microphones in position where they were recording everything. So when this snare was hit, it got recorded in the ambient and the overhead and whatever, but it also got recorded in the top mics, in the kick mic, in the hat mic. And this is a bit of masochism to be doing to yourself, but the idea is that if you want to recreate a real drum recording experience, you want that. You want to have bleed of everything into everything. So instead of getting this perfect crispness in your freaking close mic, that would be impossible in real life. You can replicate real life by forcing bleed in there. You can even control how loud every individual bleed is. You can change the phase of individual bleed in there. That's the kind of individual control you have over all that crap. And this control extends even to envelope control. You can have this envelope engaged on any individual instrument, and it'll do its job, but it'll also curtail in this exact length the room mics and whatnot if you have that engaged. Even if everything else is longer, that instrument's expression in that mic will just stop this length. And that's because there's still individual samples. It's not like an effect being played or anything. But if you say want the snare to be short in the main business but long still in the air outside, or perhaps the opposite, you can go to that mic position and you can tell it to be shorter. You might be saying, okay, well, I didn't want everything else to be shorter. I just wanted the snare to be shorter. We're talking about the snare, and that's what I was talking about that you can route this position, snare position, into something else and shorten that and have that be in there and separate and changed. And you can do that if you need to do that. Along with all that unbelievableness, you can also add third-party samples to things, which is a totally new thing for Superior Drummer 3. Superior Drummer never let you do that, and now you can. And you can even drag and drop, which is kind of awesome. I just dragged a fundamental that I synthesized onto the kick inside Superior Drummer, then I'm going to import on the articulation that I choose. I can import whatever else is active, but I'm choosing this case to go to open hit on the kick. And hey, there it is, hitting on the open. The kick as a sample has 3 individual mic positions just for the close mic. It has a microphone that's inside the kick, a microphone that's outside the kick, and a microphone that's also outside the kick, but it's big and round, which can capture bass frequencies much better, which is the whole point of those microphones. In this case, I don't actually want the microphone anymore. I want this guy to be in that microphone. You can do that, or, I mean, there's a lot of different options. Let's look at the options. We can either do the default routing, which is that it puts this guy into kick in and just layers it together. Or you can tell it to be in a new channel entirely. It'll create an X user mic. This is why it's actually here already, because I already did this. Or you can route it to the channel, like the kick sub. But then we can also go into the kick sub and tell it to just go away. So now we're not routing that kick sub from the original sample, but we have this new sample in there, and that's using the kick sub. And of course, if you're going to layer any kind of fundamental synthetic like that, the whole point of doing that is that you want a clean low end. And so that means we don't want any low end of the other two guys, the other 2 microphone positions that are here, and we're going to accomplish that with traditional regular old EQ, which is actually just super easy and great to set up in here. Honestly, you can still do this in Superior Drummer 2, but this, like everything I did with the microphone routing and all that, you could actually do with Superior Drummer 2. Just A, you couldn't load third-party samples, and B, the UI was not this easy to use. And of course, remember the whole sample shortening timing thing. Pretty sure the envelope on this guy is separate from this guy. It totally is. Yeah, look at that. So that means I can just... There we go. And so on and so forth. That should give you an idea of the kind of control you could have over individual editing of any kind of sample. And the whole reason why you would do that is that along with having the synthetic reinforcement of what we just did there, we have the full articulation around routing and velocity and sensitivity that exists in this original kick sample. And that's a pretty amazing combination of things to have, especially with the whole idea of the mic positioning and all that stuff. And you see these surround sound things, you might wonder what that is. And if you have a surround sound setup, you can route it to be that way, but this is really just a bunch of stereo pairs that you can use to be extra ambient microphones. And that's how I use them, and it's kind of, their value in life. Along with all that, with the various, that kind of very basic EQ and cutting and whatever, there's also compressors and things that actually can also accept sidechain inputs. So along with, say, like if I didn't want to go full ham on this, but only wanted to do it on, say, just the snare, I could have the snare going on in here, and then I could sidechain this from the original snare so that I get the snap of the the dry snare, but they get the ambience of the wet snare, even though this is not dry or wet or effects at all. It's individual samples of microphone positions. How dope is that? Tied perfectly to the actual original perfect actual hit. Like, this is the work that went into creating this crap and why it's so valuable. What other amazing things are present? Oh yeah, so this whole thing here, this is a song creation tool that allows you to arrange included MIDI bits that are inside Superior Drummer. I think there might actually also be a sequencer that you can use. I'm not totally sure if it's true, because I honestly am probably never going to personally use this thing. But what this exists to do, this is a macro control, by the way, because there's all kinds of parameters you can automate and modulate and control and change, and you can route them all up here if you want to get crazy with it. The whole reason that this exists and the groove section exists is for people who want to write their beats and their songs, but aren't necessarily schooled enough in the theory and the time and necessarily just to write it the way that I do. I have a lot of experience doing that to the way that I like to do it, so I don't necessarily need to use this stuff. But if you do need to, I do not care. Whatever you got to do what you want to do is how it's done. And this is actually pretty awesome. A lot of the way that this thing works is that you set up like verses, choruses, and arrangements and that kind of thing, and then it just knows where to put that kind of thing in terms of just popular setups for tracks. That combined with the grooves that exist, and the way that you find the grooves that are present, you get time signatures and sorts of whatnot, but then you also get intensity changes and that kind of thing. And then I think you could drop MIDI in here. Wow, never mind. So yeah, you can put in your own MIDI in there if I want to. I wonder if I could just put that MIDI in there. I'll have to try that out later. The depth and breadth of features that are present inside Superior Drummer 3 is beyond what I could ever have expected, and a lot of things that I didn't know I needed or cared about. Like using some of the stuff the way that I do now is, even though the features were present in Superior Drummer 2, is just pretty great as a difference. There's also this audio to MIDI tracker. If you have audio, and you can do individual tracks, so you can be like, here's the snare track and guitars, or rather, kick and snares and hats and whatnot. If you want to track an acoustic drum, but you don't have triggers, but you have microphones, you can use them as triggers. There's actually plugins and software that are out there that do this, but I used to care about this because I was a metal producer, and this is pretty big in the metal community. But all the software that pretty much existed out there was used almost universally to put out MIDI to then use Superior Drummer samples for. So that this is just built into Superior Drummer is kind of an amazing thing. If it existed 7 years ago, that would have been really amazing for me. Now it is merely amazing in theory. There's also this entire section on electronic drum mapping for your MIDI mapping for any kind of intensity and zones and positions and all that stuff, and triggering and any kind of, again, this is really important levels of control to have for this stuff, that having it inside this plugin and not as like an external tool you have to use to get it to shape it right to work with the plugin is freaking mind-blowing. Like, this isn't the plugin anymore. This is a DAW. This whole thing is a freaking drum DAW. And it earns it, every square centimeter of it, with unparalleled features and control. And that is all I have ever been about, and I am super glad it exists. If you have any questions about that, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.